14 years of experience across sectors like finance, telecoms, and aviation. He champions the power of empathy, strategy, and a human-centered design to solve real business challenges. His mantra is, design from the model to the moment. From the model to the moment. And if you're a person who is serious about turning interactions into impact, then this is a masterclass that you need to be paying attention to. To deliver it, it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Managing Director at Immersion Group. Please put your hands together for Ismail Dawjee.
Morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Is the audio good? Better now? Should I stay here? 100%. Thanks, everyone. Speaking of the wife situation, as just to follow through with the thread, I think my wife was so happy that I was out of the house. She suggested that I should leave the day before to make it here to Port Elizabeth. But thank you guys for being here and giving me the opportunity to actually share with you some of the stuff that I've learned, and this is a very nostalgic moment for me, even though you guys might not know it, because the last time I was in this room was in January 2009, and it was my graduation ceremony. So that was, and I'm just thinking to myself, like the last time I was in this room, I was such an absolute idiot, because I knew very little. I just finished with a graphic design qualification from Damlin, of all places. And it's so interesting when you get into the art of dealing with customers. It radically changes how you view yourself, how you view your business, how you view your skills. And sometimes where you start is not necessarily where you end up, right? And so for some reason, I don't know why, I am now the managing director of a company that actually does customer-centered work. Let me just see if this works. There we go. All right. Better? No? Cool. All right, customer centricity. This is quite a topic because for some reason, there is a view that businesses can be successful without focusing on the customer. And I can tell you, having worked with small companies and very big companies, that at some point the customer becomes invisible as you scale. It becomes about the way you operate. It becomes about your underlying processes. It becomes about how many front staff people you have versus back office and contact center people. And the customer just completely gets lost to such an extent that big companies have to introduce a process called voice of the customer, right? Because it's so distant from the ivory tower that they end up finding themselves in. And in some businesses, it's more aggressive than others, and in other businesses, it's less aggressive. But I think the point generally being that given where you are in the best possible position because you don't have the issues that massive enterprises have that forces them to lose sight of the most important part of any interaction you will have as an entrepreneur, which is dealing with your customer. That is going to be the number one thing that you're going to deal with. Let me just see if this goes. So Immersion Group, just to give you guys what's the word I'm looking for? A track record of where the experience is coming from that I'm going to give you today. So, my career started off here in Port Elizabeth at a small design agency, doing work for an MMU. I don't even know if it's still called that, and a bunch of other small companies, right? And so my first interaction with people was looking at how design shapes the way customers behave and how powerful brands are. And what I noticed about small businesses compared to or small medium businesses compared to what they would call enterprise businesses. Enterprise sounds fancy, but it's really just like 100 small businesses Like if you go into like a big organization, it's literally the business units are like small businesses. But the power of the brand and what it promises ultimately shapes how you're going to respond to your customer. And we'll get into what customer centricity means, but I just wanted to cover one topic quickly. I don't know if you guys know about a small business, it's humble beginnings, might not be that famous here, but in Joburg it's quite big. Do you guys know about Chicken Licken? Right? Chicken Licken. Okay, so you know, that's really good. So Chicken Licken is, for me, it's just such an iconic brand, but I want you to imagine if you would have ever known what Chicken Licken is if they didn't have hot wings. No, it's like a defining brand promise, that product and that experience, right? And you know that when you go to Chicken Licken and you order it, you're going to get hot wings. And what a lot of small to medium businesses or people who are in the entrepreneurial phase and they're looking to scale their businesses miss out on is they don't take their brand with their aspirations. And they lose that one definitive thing that you should be known for. Right? And you end up with businesses that are just putting a whole bunch of stuff into the basket all the time. And then you might be selling chicken and then, somebody gets hold of you and now all of a sudden, after you buy the chicken, somebody's trying to sell you funeral cover. You get a call, from, I don't know, Hollard or whoever the case might be. So that's an interesting point. And I think customer centricity ultimately comes down to what is the promise that you're making to your customers about how you're going to interact with them. That is a very important question that, I think if you're in the space of, you're in a business or you're managing the brand or you're managing experience or you're a small business that's looking to scale or even a medium business that's looking for as the theme for this, is growth hacking. What is the promise that you make to your customers? And the better thing I like to do with my clients is I like to ask them, what are your chicken wings? What are your hot wings in your business? What is that defining thing? Because if it's difficult to answer that question, it's very difficult to uphold yourself to being customer-centered. Because you don't really know what you're accountable for when it comes to interacting with your customer, what you should follow through on when it comes to your customer. So that's one of the key things. And you'll see from the propositions that we have, we cover design extensively. But I'd like to get something started just to make sure that this is a bit more interactive. My wife has told me that I do sound like a National Geographic commentator, so it can get a bit low, the energy. I can't follow the energy from the MC. It's impossible for me. But one of the things I wanted to share with you guys, and I don't know if that is, okay, that's not loading, but we can come back to that. It's supposed to have been a Slido link. I don't know if you guys can see it on the screen. It's not loading. Is my laptop connected to the internet? No, probably not. We'll come back to that. But when I used to work for IBM, and I think this is probably one of the things that really stuck with me about customer centricity and what shaped my career from going from doing graphic design. I used to do things like flyers and posters, and I used to run around here in town, to all of the print shops, try and get 5,000 flyers printed for like 500 Rand, and then just see them plastered all over, to being meaningful about what those things represent, right? And digital has shaped or reshaped the way we think about flyers. Now everything's on your phone, right? So digital experience is not something that you can ignore. But when I worked at IBM, this is one of the things that I came across, and it stuck with me so intensely, which is the last best experience that your customers had becomes their minimum expectation everywhere, right? So, and I think the key to unlocking customer centricity is to understand that you're not just a business who's trying to scale, you're not just entrepreneurs who's looking to be more customer-centered, you are in competition with other businesses who are doing the same, right? And so it's really important to understand, in terms of being customer-centered, where your customers are. What do they do? And a good example of this, and I don't know if we can get the live poll going. But the live poll actually helps us sort of interact directly with the screen. But perhaps maybe one question that you can ask yourself today is, the number one customers who walk into your business or who buy from you or who interact with you from a day-to-day basis, Do you know how they found you? Maybe just raise your hands. One, two, three, four, five. That's like six. Six out of what appears to be maybe close to 80, 100, right? So that's the first part of being customer-centered, is to understand where your customers are. It's really, really important, because if you don't know where your customers are, if you don't know how they find you, you can't reach new customers. Or you will reach new customers, but it will take you a really, really long time to get there. And big brands do this as well. But for them, they just don't listen to the customers. So a research company, they'll pay a research company like 5 million rand to go and figure out, do demographic studies and behavioral studies. And it comes back and it says, your number one audience is watching SABC1 between 6 and 7. And they say, let's build an app. That becomes their response to figuring out where their customers are. And it doesn't really work that well. So being able to understand where your customers are and how they discover your brand, that's the initial trick, I would call it, to customer centricity is. The reason why I brought up the chicken wings is there's a reason somebody will be attracted to your services or your products. And that's the reason why you need to understand how they discover you. Because that needs to be something you amplify across every channel that you have. Whether you've got WhatsApp for business, whether you run emails to or SMSs, or you have a website, or whatever the case might be, that's going to be the number one thing that's going to help you drive new people into using your products and services. And that scales from small businesses do it, medium-sized businesses do it, and businesses that have 30,000 employees do exactly the same thing, which is always trying to figure out where do they show up to represent themselves in order to get new customers. And part of being customer-centered is that you know how to answer that question. You know where your customers are looking for, where your customers find you. And I'm going to get to a point where I can help you figure out how to do that. Sure.
But also, I just want to find out,
Sure.
do you engage with the customers and find out where did they hear about your business, or how do you find out?
Absolutely. You have to. I'm going to give you guys let's call it a step-by-step approach, where we've taken the enterprise design process and we've been able to apply it in a scaled-down version, where you might be a part of an organization that has, there's 20 employees or 5 employees versus there's 1,000 employees and even more. The underlying definition of customer centricity remains the same. Okay, there we go. It's actually working. Fantastic. If all of you guys can take out your phones, please, so that I don't end up boring you to death. And I know you guys are connected to the Wi-Fi, so this will be really good for you. If you can go to slido.com, slido.com, and you'll see a little banner on the top that says join. And you put in that code, 3066327. You should see this, and you can leave your phone on that page, but this would be one of the first things that we do, which is I want to understand, what is your understanding of client centricity or being customer centered, which I think is maybe a first round for us. So I can see one person is on. There's a lot of people in the room, so I'm looking to see at least 50 or 60 participants there. Okay, there we go. Starting to come through. All right, so this is just to get the mechanics working, right? We're going to do this quite a bit throughout the talk, so you can see the results as well, and you can see from an audience perspective what everyone is thinking in terms of what customer centricity is and what some of the responses might be and the polls. So that way you don't end up with me just boring the hell out of you for the next 50 minutes or so. And I think we will leave time for Q&A as well. All right, 21 participants. Cool, we'll get there. Creating customer-centered business. Doing everything. Nice. Okay. There we go. All right. So now that we know that this is working, we can move on to the next pieces of information. So what makes a business customer-centered? And it really relies on three things. Now, a lot of people will tell you there's a very sophisticated process that happens in the background. There is a tremendous amount of training that you need to go on, that maybe in some instances, customer centricity is like an elite hobby that only very, very big companies with very big budgets can do. It's absolute nonsense. Customer centricity comes down to three things. Number one is how you make decisions in your business. That is very, very, very important. I've been in environments where the customer's voice actively shapes the way the business does its strategy. And I've been in equally big businesses where they know exactly what problems their customers are facing, but it doesn't form part of their sales plan. And so they just ignore it, right? So you'll end up with a bank, not this bank is great, but like other banks who will say, you know what? Our clients say that they need better interest rates on savings accounts, or for example, on managing their credit. That's what the customer feedback we're getting is. And the response to that is, and again, I'll just follow through with the theme, let's SMS everybody and offer them funeral cover. That's what ends up being the grand plan, right? And that's because businesses end up looking at their customers as metrics, right? Number of sales, number of customers, number of people that walked through the door this week, number of people that purchased, number of people that came to our website and didn't buy. That ends up being how people or businesses start to view their customers. And the problem with that is it sort of detaches you from the need that your customers have. And that's where 99% of the time you lose competitiveness. It's very difficult to compete if you're just trying to sell things and you don't actually know what your customer is looking for. You don't know what their pain points are. You don't know what their frustrations are. And I can tell you this from all of the companies that I've worked with over the last 14 and a half years, 15 years. This problem is identical in every single space, which is, most of them, especially big companies, you walk into a room and you have a plan on how to solve a customer problem or frustration, like, let's say wait times in the contact center, right? And most of you will know, like, sometimes, and I worked for another bank, Green Bank, at some point, and I built the Stockwell proposition for that bank, right? And I sat down with Stockwell's, like, the bank's view was, Stockwell's don't know how to manage money. They need a bank account, right? And I came back to them and I said, Stockwell's don't need you. They manage money better than a bank. Actually, they manage loans better than a bank. Their risk model of who gets into the Stockwell is better than the bank's risk model, right? I met like 6 ladies who manage a big Stockwell. They manage about 2.5 million rand. It's on 3 A3 pieces of paper that they use as a ledger. And they give out loans at an outrageous interest rate. It's like, okay, it's like you're not going to be able to compete with that. So what I was explaining to them is you need to create a product that supports the way Stockwells work with money. And this comes back to the decision-making process. The resulting decision behind it was that we're going to take our normal club account and call it the Stockwell account, right? So this is how businesses actively do it. And this is where customer centricity comes in, which is how are you making those decisions? Are you using the voice of your customer to shape how your products and services work? Are you truly listening? And the decision-making moment is the one that is absolutely defining, because you can see, and you'll hear this verbatim. Every client tells me, even today, being the managing director, I sit with a lot of big companies today and they tell me, we know the problem. We don't need to do research. We don't need to do surveys. We don't need to mystery shop, in our own environment to figure out how things are working. We know what the problem is. But for the last 5 years, they've done nothing about it, right? And then somebody tells them from McKinsey or somewhere to be customer-centered, you need a CRM. And then now they're sitting with 100 million rand CRM, and then I get the call and say, nobody's using it. Can you help us be more customer-centered? And so there's a bit of a decision-making issue when it comes to what you act on that your customers put forward. The second is co-creation. And co-creation is really important. This is the foundation of making things customer-centered or being a customer-centered business, is not just making decisions based on what you hear from your customers and the feedback that you're getting, but to actually co-create with them, right? Another example of this is I created a fairly successful mobile wallet at the same bank, right? The name of that mobile wallet was chosen by customers because the bank uses editorial English and the clients that they were going after had absolutely no idea what they were talking about, right? And sometimes there's this need to want to name things so that they seem appropriate. So usually they'll have like a check account, but then they'll speak to 10 people and all of a sudden now it's the Gqeberha account, It's just that little shift. So the naming actually came from that bank account. And that's one of the most successful transactional products that bank has to date for that market. And it's because customers shape the way it works. Whether we sold airtime versus you can pay your DSTV account came directly from customer feedback, regardless of whether selling funeral cover and data was more valuable, right? So it was the first time they implemented a customer-centered process. And then the last one is iteration. And iteration is really, really important. And it comes down to the way your business works with how you manage tactically all of the things you do. How much you're spending on marketing, how much you're spending on, maybe you have people who sell on your behalf, maybe you've got discounts on other stuff, but iteration is a really important thing, meaning nothing you do now should stay the same for too long, right? You have to keep listening to your customer. You have to keep making better decisions around what their needs are. You need to keep co-creating with them, and you need to get to the next iteration of your products and services. It's the only way products evolve. And if products don't evolve, you'll find very quickly that what people need versus what you offer don't match up anymore. And that's where businesses typically lose steam. It's hard for them to compete. So what do? They over-invest in something else, right? So they'll do things like, fine, our product can't be the best product. So you know what we'll do is we'll make sure that you can get our product in 3 clicks, right? That's like a common thing digitally. Like how quickly can you get it? It should be seamless, effortless, delightful, which is all junk. That doesn't exist in customer centricity. When last did you open an app and say, this is delightful? Like honestly, did you ever do that? Good experiences are invisible. They become second nature. The only time you really realize that something's done poorly is if that experience is not there, or you're measuring something else against the last best experience that you had. So this is really crucial for what makes a business customer-centered. It's not fancy processes, it's not big budgets, it's very simple, very tactical things. It means that you're actively listening to your customer in a way that it shapes your products and services. You're collaborating with them to understand how you meet their needs better, and you're iterating over it, meaning you try different things. And customer testing for us is one of the biggest things that we do, and we do A/B testing or multivariant testing. Those are just fancy words for if we have 100 customers, for every 3rd customer that walks in the door, we try the new version, right, of the product or service. And if that works, then we just roll out the new version, if people prefer it more. So that's one way of doing it. And we do that for app interfaces. We do that for product and services. We do that for testing pricing. We do that for testing marketing material and a whole bunch of other stuff. So this idea of being customer-centered has a lot more to do with your brand than anything else. I come back to what's your chicken wing, right? Your chicken wing is the thing that you promise that you can hang your hat on, that your business is known for. I'll give you a good example. If I talk to you about a business in South Africa whose number one goal is to provide you with the highest quality goods that you can get your hands on, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Louder. Woolworths. Why Woolworths? Their underlying promise is quality. right? That's like 100, it's part of everything they do. So whether they make a new packet of chips, or whether it is something they put into the ice, right, or whatever the case is, there will always be a Woolworths version of it, and they will always make it feel like it's better quality. That's their promise. That's how people discover Woolworths. That's why people keep buying from Woolworths, right? If you are on a budget like me, you end up buying from everywhere but Woolworths, right? So I'm prepared to trade off quality for price in that instance. But your brand, or what you say you do to your customers, is a promise that you make to them that you must follow through on. This is where co-creation, it's where empathy comes in, it's where the voice of customer comes in, and it's what's going to help shape your business. It's what's going to help you become more customer-centered. It's the reason why people will keep buying with you, is because they know you fulfill your brand promise, all right? We've all been in situations where we saw something, it was really interesting, we saw an ad, maybe it was on Taxi TV, or maybe it was on, scrolling through Instagram, or whatever the case might be, and you went through the entire process and you were completely disappointed with the end result. Has that ever happened? Well, I thought you guys were just like angels and saints who get everything perfectly. But we've all been through that process, and that is where customer centricity fails. It's where an expectation was set with you by that business around what their promise is and what they deliver, and they fail to follow through on it. That's where customer centricity fails. It means, if you look at this slide, for example, the relationship between the customers, the promise you make to the segments you're dealing with, right? And everybody will have different segments. It doesn't matter what the scale of your business is, you have different segments that you deal with, different behaviors, different customers that use you for different things. There are things like what your propositions and solutions are and what the relationships are between those two. If they're not connected, if they're not cohesive, you end up with that customer-centric problem, which is you might have a business who every individual part operates differently, and it's hard to collaborate, it's hard to make decisions. In some instances, it's like, decision by committee. People are not empowered to deal with customers more directly. And you end up with very big businesses who feel like they're very detached, very, very detached. It's the same like sometimes a bank, you will tick no marketing, but somebody from marketing will still call you. And that's because when you tick no marketing, that system in that business unit, they couldn't decide on the criteria for it, so they made two versions. So now in a different product house, you are ticked for marketing, right? And the example I like to use for cohesion in brand is Apple. Everybody knows Apple? Everybody knows Apple. Apple is one of those things where it feels like everything is designed to work together. That's what that cohesion means. Everything from the products, the service, the brand, the packaging, the customer support, even those fabulous videos that they have voiceovers for, it feels cohesive because the way they make decisions about how they go to market with their customers is very different. They make it feel for you like everything works and feels connected, even though they might be completely different components in their business, right? Behind the scenes, there's different teams, different operations, there's salespeople, there's marketing and events people, there's technical people, but they come together for that sole purpose, which is they have a much more focused effort on making decisions for the customer. Now, in some of the ways some of the South African businesses work, if you applied like the model for a bank or a telco in South Africa to a company like Apple, you might end up having to go to two different shops to buy headphones at one shop and then a laptop at another one. Because they take their org structure to market. That's one of the things that you really can't do. You have to focus on making it feel for your customer like it's one thing, right? And that's absolutely critical to how products and services work. And that's how people derive value from what you put in, right? This is for you. So people typically don't know what customers value. And I'll give you a good example of this. Do you guys know it's a very famous brand. It has like a rectangular logo, red with big, thick writing. It's called Hilti, Hilti. The very fancy drill. You guys know that company? Have you seen it before? Yeah. they did this process as well. They went through this process of trying to understand what do our customers really value about us. They were convinced it was the drill, right? They were convinced we create a high quality product, it's fantastic, that's why people buy it. And they went through this short exercise of just listening to their customers about the drill. And it turns out that customers don't value the drill. They value the hole in the wall, right? That's why they want the drill. They don't want the drill just because it's a fancy drill. They're trying to get a job done, right? They're trying to get a job done. When they understood that people are not trying to buy the drill, they're trying to make a hole in the wall, they completely redid their B2B offering. They turned it into leasing instead of selling. Right? And that's they innovated in a space that nobody really, drills. Who's innovating in drills, right? You buy one, it lasts like 10 years. Right? The average life cycle for that product is fairly long. So they turned it into a leasing thing where they manufacture it, they maintain it, they clean it, they deliver it, and they pick it up. And what you really get to do is pay a better price to make a hole in the wall, right? So that's the advantage of being customer-centered. That's what happens when you look at, is there cost value for my customer? Is there experience value for my customer? And is there platform value for my customer? Platform is more specific to the digital side of things, which is, how can you scale your offering to a lot more people? I had this conversation with my father, a small anecdote. My father used to own a shop on Gqeberha called DAX International. I don't know if anybody's heard about it, right? Clothing, shoes, Nike, Nevada suits, all of those kinds of things, right? And it was a very successful business. Like it was a really, really good business. And in around 2012, I told him, you know what? You have cost value and you have experience value. Because his segment was clear. People used to come from Motherwell and from Algoa Park. At the end of the month, they used to go to Checkers, spend 90% of their money on food, stop at our shop and buy shoes, and then go home. That was who our segment was. And they were perfectly comfortable. We didn't have to change anything about it for them. But they knew the value that they were getting at our store because we had really, really good prices. So we had cost value, right? Experience value, we had about 26 people who could serve you at any time. So it was like a dedicated, customer liaison person who walks around with you and helps you fit the stuff on and matches things for you and all of that kind of stuff. But we didn't have platform value. So I suggested to my father, you know what, maybe we should start trying to sell things online, or at least start taking orders online. And I built a small prototype for him. And he laughed at me. So I think it was probably 3 weeks ago, I sent him an article about the company we used to buy from, Sky Clothing, who now drop ships for Zando and Superbalist, which was the exact same thing. It was the most beautiful I told you so message I've ever sent in my time. Like I told you should have listened to me. We were like 8 years ahead of the curve in that one. But this is a good example of looking at sometimes what your customers are looking for is not just price. I think that's a really important thing. Price typically is only a problem for customers in the absence of value. They don't know what the hole in the wall is. They don't know what the chicken wing is. If that's starting to make sense around customer centricity, right? Which is, they don't know what the promise is. They don't know how you deliver it. And so they don't know if you've done it or not, right? And that creates the reason why somebody might try something from you one time and then not try it again, versus an over-engineered experience. And this will focus on customer centricity in terms of actually designing things. Like, I'll give you an example. Who here knows what a first-time purchase is? First-time purchase. First-time purchase is a focus area in a journey map that you actually draw out from how your customer discovers your brand, like on WhatsApp, for example, how they get to your store, how they browse, how they decide, and how they buy for the first time. Most brands over-engineer that first-time experience. Because if the first-time experience fails, you probably lost that customer. Like their ability to come back and say, let me do this thing that didn't work again, is going to be very low. So a lot of people, their first-time experience is over-engineered. They make it as perfect as they can possibly make it. And that's like one of the key things too. That's more tactical around customer experience, which is you're looking at your customer through the lens of the journey they go through. And that's why I meant things like if you understand awareness, if you understand first-time purchasing, if you understand all of these things, and you actually like can draw it out, or even just in an Excel spreadsheet, start plotting down where your customers are finding you, how often do they search for you, how many views you have on Facebook, all of that kind of stuff. It's very easy for you to look at what your first-time purchase is, and you can over-engineer your first-time purchase so that you create trust in your promise, in the thing that you deliver. When the first-time version works, you might screw up 3 weeks down the line. Your customer will forgive you. They'll really forgive you. They will. And it's a good example of this is Takealot. Takealot's first-time experience is over-engineered. But I can tell maybe we've all had issues where Takealot got the order wrong, or they deliver it to the wrong place, or maybe there was stuff that was in your box that wasn't supposed to be there, but you shook it off because you know, like the first time it works, that trust factor has been built, that connection with their brand has been built. So you always have a reason to trust them. And that's where focusing on different kinds of value actually comes in. Cool. Let's go to the next one. Does everybody still have their phones open on that same link? You should be on a different page now. The question is, what truly makes a business centered around its customers? This is a test question. It's to see if you guys had fallen asleep while I was talking between the last slide and this one. Once you open it on your phone, you can just leave that page open. It will automatically change for you whenever the next slide comes up. So this is a word cloud, right? So basically whatever this room is typing will show up live on the screen. I see some people are putting the code into the thing. That's fine. Value. That's very interesting. If I did anything right today, it's that you guys understand the core is what is the value that you create, and when you create it, do you deliver it consistently? So that's really, really good. I'm glad to see that. Nice. Moving on. So journey foundations, right? We said customer centricity is based on whether or not you use what your customers are saying to actively help you decide how you should improve your products and your services. You should work with your customers and with your staff, with your teammates to try and make solutions better, and you should iterate, right? But that might seem very difficult to do because in what context? Like, where are we doing this? What path is it plotted out against? How do we manage something like this? Even if we're a company of 5 people and we do maybe catering for events, how do we actually figure out how to improve a customer experience? And this is what a basic journey looks like, right? You'll see, and I don't know if you guys can see all of the steps, but you should see, and you can use this as a baseline for journeys. When we started out with this, a lot of the companies that we work with, big and small, they have like an Excel spreadsheet, right? And they create columns, one for each name. You'll see there's search, evaluate, purchase, onboard, activate, first time use, all of those little, keywords. Those are called journey stages, right? These things happen today in every business, but in most of them, these stages are just not designed. So it's just there as an undesigned experience, right? Or very manual experience. So once you have this in your back pocket, it's very easy to start understanding what phase your customer is in and how you design for it. Where do you make better decisions? Where do you need to collaborate? Where do you need to iterate? On what instance? You don't need to necessarily design the entire journey from beginning to end. And just understanding your customer's experience with your brand in this context will help you improve so many things. Because there's a certain point you reach with your customer where they become advocates of your services and your brands. They will tell other people about it. And that's what we call social proof, right? Social proof is a very, very strong component to how customer experiences work. If somebody you know tells you that something is good, you're more likely to try it even if it's bad, right? And we'll do a quick experiment about, the trust factor, the social proofing factor. This was an experiment done with Airbnb. Airbnb had a very difficult job to do. How do we normalize the experience of a random person from somewhere you don't know where they've come from, right? To actually stay in your house. That is a very difficult design challenge. That is a very tricky thing. So if everybody can do me a favor, take out your phones. Everybody have their phones, right? Unlock your phone. Is your phone unlocked? Give it to the person next to you. That's the Airbnb design challenge, right? You don't actually have to, you can give it back. I'm just saying, just like I get into trouble for doing that. So at Airbnb's stages of purchase, that's what they're asking customers to do. That's what that feeling is like. So when they come to that point of purchase, they need social proof. They need things that help customers feel like it's okay to do this. You can trust it. So what do? Very simple thing. Reviews. Reviews and ratings. How many people rated it? Is it 5-star? Is it 1-star? Is it 3-star? Was the view really good? Did they make really nice food? That's how they create the social proofing aspect that makes it okay to buy, which is why on every e-commerce website you go to, there's a comment section behind a product. There's a review section behind a product, right? And the review that actually matters the most still today, even though digital is so prevalent, is word of mouth. Word of mouth is still a massive component to how people share, which is why companies like Uber, for example, they use that, but they digitized it, which is like, hey, if you share Uber with one of your friends with this link, you'll get 50 Rand off your next. They hijacked your word of mouth. You know what? It's such a small user experience moment, which is literally there's a button that says share it with somebody and you'll get 50 Rand off your next ride. It's something that's so small and so intricate. It fits at the purchasing part of the journey. So if you listen to your customers and you observe what they do and how they interact with you, you can design that moment. You can add social proofing to it. You can add sharing it with other people to scale your business. You can add mechanisms at each stage of your journey to improve client centricity, right? To make sure that we're listening to our customers, we understand where these problems and frustrations they have occur, and we can iterate and we can make better decisions and we can fix it. That's what the journey does, or designing a journey around your customer does for you. Now, if some of the companies that I work with, they have hundreds of journeys. Why? Because they have hundreds of products. And each one of those products is like a different business unit on its own. There's a different person that manages it. And so majority of the work that we do when it comes to journeys is try to say, if a good example of this is the product catalog at MTN, with the amount of devices they have, the amount of configuration for those devices, the color, the size, how much of memory it has, what type of camera it has. Then if you add on top of that, what kind of bundle you'll get with it, how much of airtime, how much of call time, how much of network to network or versus any time. Whether, I don't know why they do this. They tell you get 10 gigs, but the other 5 gigs you can only use at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? Which is, because that's when we're all using 5 gigs worth of data. So like all of these intricate things, for every one of those products, there's a buying experience. And dealing with an Apple user is different than dealing with an Android user. I'm team Android, by the way. I don't want to cause any issues with all of that kind of stuff. But in those instances, they have lots of journeys to manage, and so they need a big scaled framework, right? The advantage of being, and this is why I love, Immersion Group itself is a small business. We have 50 employees, right? But it's 100 million Rand a year business. And that's because we focused all our energy on delivering the promise. The promise is if you work with us, you will fundamentally improve your business, right? And if you can follow through on that promise, people will keep using you. And when it comes to mass orchestration of those journeys, the number one thing we do is we take like 500 journeys in a business and figure out maybe, just maybe, you don't need a different onboarding journey for everybody. You know, onboarding, like customer onboarding, like, okay, you bought something from a bank and now they send you all of these documents and now you have to like fill the stuff in, and then every page needs a signature and an initial, and then at the end you have to put your name again and an initial, and then they give you another form. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. That's when legal and compliance win, is what happens when you end up in that situation. But those things are much simpler to do. They're very easy to do. Now you get software where you put your signature in once and you just say yes to whatever they ask you to sign, right? So that's a very simple tactical solution. That auto document signature thing, I think, is a tool that pretty much anyone can get. There's open source versions of it or whatever the case is. But these are small tactical areas where customer experience meets brand promise, and that decision-making criteria becomes part of whether or not your customer centered or not. Any business could have said, you know what, let's just leave the form the way it is. Why do you want to change it? Customers are signing it in any case. Right? Why do we need to change it? And that's a very tricky subject to get into, because a lot of the time, people, like I said, people will try to do the 3 clicks thing, which is they don't have another way to compete. They're not building good experiences, so they think they can have better technology. And then they lose their brand, because now you're competing on how many clicks. And if you're competing on how many clicks, it comes down to who has the biggest budget for IT. Your brand is gone. It's not going to matter what your value proposition is now, because you told people the way you must measure me is on my promise of how many clicks. Not what the quality of the product is, not what the history of our brand is, not how many people know me, not how many product reviews I have. None of those things matter anymore. So that's a very tricky thing to manage with technology companies. All right. This is a really cool one. Let's see. In the last 6 months, how many of you have mapped a basic journey, basic customer journey? Is it active? I don't know if we connect. It's not active. Are we connected to? No? Let me go back. Well, if you guys hit refresh now. Okay, we'll come back to this. I think it's the connectivity thing, because it was working before. What I'll do for you guys is I will leave this questionnaire open so you guys can fill it out after, and then I'll hopefully can, with the team in the back, can share the results with you so you guys can see it. Why? The question always comes down to why. So customer centricity is great. Building customer journeys is good. Being collaborative is great. Making better decisions is good. The question always is, so what? Why? Like, why even bother? I had a senior executive in banking tell me when I was trying to explain to him that we needed to be number 1 in digital experience. He asked me why. I said, why don't you want to be number 1 in digital experience? He said, because it costs too much. I said, but that's sort of nullified by your growth, which is you get new customers, you get, you become a bigger business. And he said, Ismail, let me tell you something. It's different for banking than everybody else. I can be the worst bank in South Africa, but I'll still make money. That was what he said. And that's because banks are protected, right? But not everybody's business model is protected by the Reserve Bank. I wish everybody's business model was protected by the Reserve Bank. So you get some businesses who have that kind of cover, but you get a lot of businesses who don't. And the difference between them is on the so what question. Why customer experience? Is because customer experience gives you a new way to compete and to grow your business that doesn't rely on you changing your price or having the best product. Because sometimes you can't have the best product. I know, like Immersion Group's not the best design company in the world. There are other design companies who have been around in the market for 50 years longer than we have. And they've built up expertise at such massive scale that I can't honestly say that, technically, we are absolutely the best in the world, and that's why people buy from us. No, not even a chance. It's more has to do with the promise we make to our customers, and that's why they trust us. They trust that we deliver. They trust in the quality of work. They trust in the speed at which we can turn things around. They trust that they can rely on us, even in the most difficult circumstances. Those are the factors off of which we created the journey and experience for our customers. That means, because not all of us will be able to be in a position. Say, for example, you run a business that sells fabric cleaner, right? Is it the best fabric cleaner in the world? Do you have the research and development budget to make it the best in the world? No. And so you might not be in a position where your product is the definitive thing, like it's the best chicken wing in the entire universe. That might not actually be the case. So experience gives you a way to compete outside of the places where it might be difficult for you. You can compete on other angles. You can compete on experience value. And that's a really critical thing. And the reason why it matters is because bigger companies have understood this, right? I know this is difficult to read, but this is a 10-year study done by Motive Strategies on companies that are customer-centric. They tracked over 10,000 or 100,000 design decisions for how they're managing finances, when do they make decisions, are they prioritizing the customer. This is a research report that I'm sure I can share the link with you guys after. That tracked over these 10 years customer-centered or customer-centric businesses who do all of the things I just told you about, outperform the S&P market by 219%. Like not even close. And it's because they found new ways to be competitive that didn't mean that they had to be the best product manufacturer. They didn't have to have the best phone. They might have to have the most affordable phone. Maybe they didn't have the best customer contact center service, but they had the best delivery service. Maybe the staff was friendlier in certain instances, or they borrowed from the hospitality industry and applied it to banking or telecommunications or whatever the case might be. So this is a really important factor. The reason why it matters is because, and I could have shared 100 case studies with you that says, for small businesses, personalization, keeps customers more active for 6 months. None of those things matter because they're all small measures. The biggest study on the so what question, why customer centricity is important, is because fundamentally you will outperform your competitors because you have new ways to compete. And those new ways to compete gives you an opportunity where you don't have to put in all of your money into product improvement or scaling staff, or trying some, very fancy marketing acrobatics. So practically, what can you do? What can you do now to help you be more customer-centered? And there's a couple of things. So number one is you need to make your customers' feedback visible, right? That means that you need to be speaking to your customers more often, and you need a way to document it. Microsoft Word is a great tool. So it doesn't really, the tool chain is not important. The culture of being customer-centered is important, right? So don't worry about the tooling yet. But just being able to make your customers' feedback visible after their interaction with you, and you don't need to spam them, like at every conversation, at the end of every second, at the end of every sentence. How was the service? Was it good? Was it great? Is it better? No. So maybe every 3 to 4 times they interact with you, you can ask them that question. But you need to make that feedback visible to your internal stakeholders, to your own team, to the people that you work with, even if they have nothing to do with your part of the business. Right? Even if they have nothing to do with your part of the business. Because cohesion will come from people being able to use the advantage you create or the feedback you get to improve something else. That's usually how it works. Number 2 is map at least one part of the journey. Fix at least one part, or try and understand one part of your journey, either your first time buying experience, or the way your customers find you, or what your marketing and branding looks like, or even better, retention, right? Which is, how many of you know the reason why the customers you have keep buying with you? Did you ask that question? Is there like a definitive answer to it? Is it the same for everyone? It could be, fairly different for everyone. The third is be vocal. So if your customers tell you something, like, oh, I didn't really like the packaging, right? And you change the packaging. Maybe it's cheaper packaging, but it looks better. Tell them you changed it. Tell them you changed it. Send out an email, or at least in conversation with the customers at an interaction level, say, you know what, we changed our packaging. Our customers were unhappy with it, so we did something about it. That's a very clear indicator that people listen to customers. So, and I'll get to why that's important. Recovery from bad experiences. You can create a small discretionary budget, 50 Rand per person per month, where if they do something horribly wrong in front of a customer, like they fail on the brand promise, they are empowered to fix it with the customer. It can be airtime, it can be a meal voucher, it doesn't matter what it is. What the customer will feel is that you understood the frustration you caused for them and you did something about it. You did something to make it better instantaneously. Right? So like a small discretionary budget or small VAS items, like value-added services items, whether they're part of your business or not, even if it's a 1% discount or free delivery or whatever the case might be, those are drivers that help you recover from bad experiences, that make sure you don't lose customers because of something small. That customer could have the lifetime value of buying 20 times from you every month for the next 10 years. You can't lose out on that because the person sitting and interacting with the customer doesn't have the ability to do anything about it. They just have to, what do they end up saying? Oh, the system is offline. I can't really do anything about it. And then the last one is ask questions and ask often. So this means speak to your customers about why they work with you, why they shop with you. I know it sounds very simplistic, and it feels very simplistic, but this is actually the core foundation of strategy for being customer-centered, right? Those basic things that I gave you on what you can do immediately to reshape the way or how customer-centered you are being, they map back to a culture of sharing insight, right? Sharing customer feedback. They map back to the practice of mapping journeys, understanding how your customer engages with you. Communicating change. This is so super important. I've seen a lot of brands do this. There are some brands, they have amazing products and amazing features, and you will never know about it because they are horrendous at communicating with you. Like, it's very difficult for them to actually get the feature. What's the thing that you actually changed? Which is why we do something called feature spread, right? To try and figure out, is the thing that we put into the ecosystem for the customer something that they actually use, right? So if we put a feature into an app, how many people are actually using it? Do they even know about it? Did they discover it? Did we tell them that it exists? Or did we, believe it's going to happen like automatically, right? The fourth one is empowering staff, right? So that discretionary budget is a very simple mechanism that you can use. It's used in every kind of business, but it just means that your front line who's interacting with your customer can do something about bad experiences. And empowering staff is a very key part of our market, like the South African market, where regardless of how big or how digital a business gets, it's still service orientated. There's still a contact center. You're still going to deal with somebody in a branch or in a store or whatever the case might be. And then the third is implementing client metrics. So the reason why you should keep asking your customer every 3 or 4 interactions whether or not they're still happy with the service of the product is actually a customer satisfaction score. You're starting to measure if you're client-centric or not. You're starting to measure what your customers actually think of your products. And there's so many other things that you can go and explore behind it. But these are the foundations of a client strategy that will fundamentally improve the way you interact with your customers. And you can do this later today if you wanted to on that tactical plan. I'm going to skip this for now because I want to share it with you guys later. Is that fine? And then there's strategy at scale, right? Client experience at scale. So this one looks very, very, very daunting. But once you become, everybody here in their heads knows what they would like their businesses to be, right? And at that scale, if you are customer-centered now, this becomes easy for you. You don't have to figure out how to become customer-centered later, which is what people are doing at the moment now. And all this really means is it maps out all of the key parts of your business in a very clear, very rational way. So there's an exchange between your clients and the way you build products and the way you deliver them. That's the foundation of those. Cool. The last thing that I'll cover before we get into some level of Q&A if there is time. The biggest problem in my career that I've ever witnessed is ideation. Ideation is a very difficult thing. It's not a muscle that people use often, to think creatively about how you can solve a problem. You need a lot of inspiration for this. Small businesses need to do it. When I say small businesses, I mean early businesses. I don't mean small. Small is the word banks use, right? I'm a small business, but I'm not technically small. You get what I'm saying? I would call it early stage businesses, which is it's a business that is growing in its market share, it's growing in its operations, it's growing in its scale. But regardless of whether you're an early business or like late business, which is you've been in the market for very long and you've scaled quite big, biggest problem we've seen people have is ideation. They don't know how to come up with good ideas. They know what the problem is. They know what their frustrations. You think, for example, like the idea of filling out forms, in a place, given that most other places you interact with are digital, forms seem like mundane. The people who are giving you the forms know it's a problem, right? But they don't know how to fix it in their context, with their systems, with their staff, with their developers, with their budgets. It's very difficult for them to do it. Ideation is a very important tool. And today what I'm going to give you is like a magical tool to use. It's called what if. Right? What if is fascinating because what it does is it takes a problem that your customers are having and you ask yourself the question, what if, where you imagine a future where that problem is solved, right? And these are the what ifs for some very famous companies. So you'll see, for example, Nike had a problem of people queuing outside stores for at midnight the night before. So you end up with like a queue around the block. So they took that customer frustration and they turned it into a campaign where you can actually queue with an avatar that you make outside the store. And it became like a viral effect of being able to create a 3D version for yourself and then stand in the line, right? WhatsApp asked the question, the what if, which is where they felt like, how do we make sure that our brand doesn't become associated with poor experiences? So they said, if that was the constraint that we have, what if you were charged a fee for bad experience? Right? Where they implemented, like if you don't turn around within 24 hours, they actually penalize you in their system on WhatsApp for Business to make sure that WhatsApp is always associated with good experiences. You have companies like Revolut. Revolut is like a fintech in the UK, well, in Europe. And their what if was, what if your product was only used once? This is actually where they came up with the idea for the one-time card. I know we're very used to one-time pins, but they have one-time cards, which is when people are scared to buy online, you generate a card that can be used one time, all right? So this is the power of the what if. The what if forces you to deal with different scenarios. So you can say the problem you have is inversed, or it's exaggerated, or it's the opposite in the opposite way. Right? So if you apply this to your business today, or in any environment that you're in today, to ask the question, what if, based off of listening to customer constraints or customer frustrations, it gives you a new way to think about how you might build solutions. Right? And there's so many what if exercises. The last thing that I do is I just want to play 2 videos for you guys where the combination of brand promise, customer-centered thinking, propositions, the actual solution all come together in a cohesive way. There's 2 examples. And I hope the audio works for this. Let's see. There's a reason why you're clapping for that. Is because they solved every problem you currently have with that credit card, which is the advantage. So the 5 things on the slide that I gave you, making sharing insight part of the culture of your business, mapping out key stages of a journey, being able to manage change and communications with your customers, and being able to actually measure whether your experiences are good or not, is the foundation of how Apple became this, right? Remember, it started off with like 4 guys in a garage whose first computer was an unassembled computer in a box, right? That was like 20 years ago. It's not a long time. It's not a long time ago. So customer centricity is something that can help you scale really quickly. It's something that can make your business the thing you want it to be. And it's also more fun. It's better to make things good for your customers than for it to be something that's just undesigned, right? And all of the issues that you saw there, I think, are sort of evident that you guys would love that thing. Like Apple doesn't even have to think twice, right? Apple is like, the Woolworths of mobile phones. Thank you guys for bearing with me. I know, like I said, my wife said I have quite a National Geographic voice. So I can imagine from the great energy of the MC and even the guy from F&B, can you imagine? There was a bit of a dip. So I hope the content filled up for that.